The old house groaned under the relentless assault of the wind and rain. Inside, the storm's fury was palpable. The house's creaks and moans were amplified by the storm. The wind howled through unseen cracks. Rain battered the windows with increasing intensity. A deafening crack. Thunder shook the walls. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the room in a brief flash. Eerie shadows danced across the walls. Sarah, alone for the weekend in her family's ancestral home, felt a shiver crawl down her spine. She tried to focus on her book, hoping to lose herself in its pages. But every creak, every groan, every gust of wind made her jump, her heart pounding. The house seemed to be alive. The silence between thunderclaps felt suffocating. The house suddenly felt vast and unfamiliar. Portraits of ancestors seemed to watch her with knowing eyes. Their eyes seemed to follow her every move. She told herself it was just an old house, settling and groaning with age. Nothing to fear, just an overactive imagination. Then, with a sudden pop, a shower of sparks erupted from the old light fixture. The lights flickered and then died, plunging the room into darkness. Darkness swallowed the room whole. Now there was only the storm and Sarah's pounding heart. She was truly alone now, utterly isolated in the dark with only her fear for company. The darkness was absolute, a suffocating blanket. The silence inside the house was deeper than the storm raging outside. An unnatural stillness reigned. Sarah strained to hear anything familiar, anything to break the oppressive quiet. But there was only the wild weather, a symphony of chaos that only served to amplify the eerie calm within, until a faint, unnatural rustling came from the darkest corner, a sound so subtle it was almost imperceptible. She held her breath, her heart pounding, telling herself it was just the wind, a draft sneaking in through a crack in the window. The sound faded, leaving her in a state of heightened anxiety, but then it returned, clearer, colder, closer. The rustling was no longer a distant whisper, it was right there, in the room with her. The sound had morphed into something else, something far more disturbing. It was a whisper, a breathy, ethereal sound that seemed to slither through the darkness. The whisper wrapped around her name like a shroud. This was real, undeniably real. Something was in the room with her, a presence that radiated malice. Fear rooted Sarah in place, her mind racing for answers. Forcing herself to move, she crept toward the corner, whispering, "Who's there?" Lightning flashed, illuminating a tall, twisted shadow on the wall, where nothing stood to cast it. The shadow was impossibly long, featureless and wrong. Thunder crashed, plunging her back into darkness, but the image burned in her mind. The whisper came again, closer now. "Sarah!" The shadow was moving, closing in. Panic surged. She had to escape. She bolted for her phone. Panic. A cold wave broke the paralysis that had gripped her. It shattered the stillness, forcing her into action. She scrambled desperately for her phone, her lifeline in this sudden abyss of fear. Her hands, slick with sweat, fumbled clumsily in the dark, knocking against unseen objects on the nightstand. Each failed grab amplified her anxiety. Finally, her fingers closed around the cool metal of the phone. She found it, thumbed the flashlight on with a shaky press, her heart pounding in her chest, and a beam of light, sharp and white, cut through the oppressive darkness, momentarily blinding her. It sliced through the inky black, offering a small beacon of hope. The corner where she thought she'd seen the shadow was empty. No shadow, nothing but the bare walls. No figure, no lurking presence, nothing to explain the chilling whisper she'd heard. Nothing, just an empty space, mocking her fear. She swept the light around the room, the beam dancing across familiar objects, searching for any sign of intrusion. Everything was as it should be, undisturbed and ordinary. The furniture stood in its place, the books on the shelves remained untouched. The whisper was gone, vanished as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by the storm's familiar noise, the relentless drumming of rain against the windows. Relief flooded her, a wave of calmness washing over her tense muscles. Maybe, just maybe, it was just her imagination, a trick of the light and shadow, amplified by the storm raging outside. She laughed shakily, a nervous sound that echoed in the stillness, trying to convince herself she was safe, that there was nothing to fear. The light felt like a shield, a small but potent barrier, pushing back the encroaching darkness, and the fear that came with it. She decided to head to her bedroom, seeking the comfort of her own space, flashlight clutched tightly in her hand, its beam cutting a path through the darkness. The worst, she thought with a sigh of shaky relief, was over. But deep down, a sliver of doubt remained, a nagging feeling that something was still amiss. Sarah moved down the hallway, portraits watching as she swept the light ahead. The air behind her grew icy, the world outside fading into silence. Focused on the path to her room, she didn't notice the chill creeping closer. She reached for the wall, almost safe. Then, a whisper, right behind her, cold breath on her neck. "You can't hide from me." The darkness was alive, and it knew her name. What would you do if you were Sarah, trapped in the dark with the whispering shadow?